Welcome. We very much appreciate you being here today. Welcome. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I think we're having a lot of call-ins from all different time zones. Welcome to this side event during the UN Water Conference 2023 of the ZDHC Foundation, hosted by the ZDHC Academy. This side event, Wastewater Management in the Textile, Footwear and Leather Industry, Challenges, Progress and the Role of Education, will be a panel discussion. So we will have a limited amount of slides for you today, but mostly people from the industry talking. In this session, we will be having the possibility for some Q&A. So I will first say some operational things. Please put all your questions that you have for us in the Q&A box that you see in your screen, and preferably not in the chat. So we will be able to get together all your questions and to answer them or within the session itself, or maybe afterwards if needed. So please do put all your questions in the Q&A. The session will be recorded, so we will also share the session afterwards with you directly via email, so that you will be able to review it or share it with your colleagues whenever you wish to review it again. With that, we will start to share with you the agenda of the session, and I will introduce to you, of course, who are the hosts and the moderators. So with me today is Klaas Nuupboom, Implementation Director of ZDHC, and he will be moderating this session together with me, Mariella Noto, Senior Implementation Manager of ZDHC and Head of the ZDHC Academy. With us, we're not doing this by ourselves, is quite a big panel today, and we're very happy that they're joining us as well from all over the world. We will go through a welcome and an introduction of the ZDHC itself and an introduction of the whole panel that is joining us. Then after that, we will dive into the challenges of the textile, apparel, leather and footwear industry in relation to wastewater management and effluent treatment. Of course, we also see a lot of progress and opportunities in our industry, and we would like to share and discuss them with those with you as well. And last but not least, there are already some available solutions, and there is a role of education to play in the solutions within our industry that we would like to tip into and also hear some of your comments on. After that, we will do a conclusion and a wrap up, and hopefully we will be able to get a lot of questions from you directly via the Q&A. So who is our panel today? We have a big panel, so we have 2 slides actually to cover them in total. So with us today are Sharif from H&M Group, and he is the Impact Lead Water of H&M. Very welcome to you, Sharif, to join us today during this panel. With him joining is Sohail from WWF Pakistan. And welcome to you too. So you're both in Asia at the moment. Elena Alonso Esperanza from Burberry, who's joining us, Senior Manager, Sustainable Manufacturing. Claudio Terniden from the Water Environmental Federation in the US, who's Chief Policy Officer. Jimmy Summers, Vice President of Environmental Health, Safety and Sustainability and Chief Sustainability Officer of Elevate Textiles. His colleague, unfortunately, will not be able to make it today, but hopefully he will be channeling in, and hopefully he might have some questions to answer to you at a later stage. And then for the rest of our panel, we have Marion from Hugo Boss, who is joining us. Marion is Senior Expert Chemical Management, Sustainable Supply Chains at Hugo Boss. We have Anega Nimkar from Nimkartech, Managing Director of the organization. Manuel Romero from Pantarai, Technical Department Director. Gundolf Klaan, Project Manager, Skills for Self-Monitoring and Compliance with Clean and Fair Production in the Textile Industry of the GIZ. And last but not least, Carlos Lopez Vasquez from IHE Delft, who is Associate Professor of Wastewater Treatment Technology at the IHE Delft Institute for Water Education. A very big panel, and a very big welcome to all of you. And of course, we appreciate your collaboration with the ZDHC Academy very much. Now I would like to hand over the floor to my respected colleague, Klaas Nuupboom, who will give you an introduction to the ZDHC and why we are actually here today during this side event at the UN Water Conference 2023. Klaas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mariella. Thank you. But before I start with my talking points, I would like to share the video that was already teasered on the screen. And so I will share my screen in this case here. And I hope this works technically.
The global fashion industry is one of the largest consumers of fresh water on the planet. The global consumption level of water by the fashion industry is 93 billion cubic meters of water, or 4% of global fresh water. Consider the impact of producing 6 billion pairs of jeans alone each year, when you know each kilo of cotton takes up an astonishing 22,500 liters of water. Textile dyeing has the potential to contaminate local waterways when it's not treated properly, from where the contamination spreads into soil and into the sea and the global water cycle. You can't have a sustainable strategy focused on climate, healthy ecosystems and rich biodiversity, clean water or fashion circularity without consideration of chemicals in your production processes. In response to these vital global problems, ZDHC has developed Wastewater Guidelines and a manufacturing restricted substances list to stop hazardous chemicals being introduced into the value chain. Join us in our commitment to enabling the fashion industry to evolve into taking on its responsibility for global water stewardship.
Yeah, wonderful. I hope for everyone who's joining in today into our session, without the firm background in what ZDHC is all about and what we are doing with our stakeholder and community, this was a little bit of an insightful presentation. What we would like to discuss today, my distinguished guests, my dear colleagues, participants online, and of course, my dear panelists from around the world. I'd like to say first, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because we are really spread across the time zones. It's great to see so many of you coming into this session here from all over the world. In our side event, we will explore the crucial topics and the role of education. Education on sustainable development in the textile, footwear, and leather industry, professional education in wastewater management, to be specific, and the role of business and sector collaborations in promoting them. As we all know, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development sets forth ambitious goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, to address global challenges and to ensure a better future for all. One of these goals, SDG 4, aims to promote lifelong learning opportunities and technical and vocational skills for employment, decent jobs, and entrepreneurship. Achieving this goal is crucial for building a skilled workforce that can adapt to changing job market demands and contribute to sustainable economic growth, and enable our globalized community to combat the existence-threatening triple planetary crisis. Business and collaborations have a vital role to play in promoting education and skill building. They can create programs that provide employees with continuous opportunities to improve their job skills, both for their employment and for responsible consumption patterns. Multi-stakeholder initiatives like ZDHC Foundation and the ZDHC Academy play an important role to streamline and converge individual approaches and thereby address the needs of an industry facing enormous challenges. The development of cost-effective and high-impact education programs, training courses, and curricula is an achievement of a community which is reflected in the diversity and the background of our panel today, and the ZDHC Academy and its training providers every day in their doing. Hence, we need to be more ambitious. We need to be disruptive in the developing curricula that do not only improve harmful processes and practices, but curricula that break them and enable change management, driving innovation and sustainable development. It is more evident than ever that in the context of water and wastewater management, we are facing a triple planetary crisis: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, which makes it more urgent than ever to improve our management of water resources. SDG target 6.3 in particular aims to improve water quality by reducing pollution, eliminating dumping, and minimizing the release of hazardous chemicals and materials. And the ZDHC community, our stakeholders, trainers, practitioners, experts, and learners contribute their experience in order to go beyond improving practices. In today's session, we will hear from their experience and challenges. Professional education and lifelong learning for sustainable development are key components in achieving SDG 6 and the other goals of the 2030 agenda and addressing the triple planetary crisis. We must recognize the importance and the critical role that businesses and collaborations, multi-stakeholder initiatives like ZDHC and the ZDHC Academy need to play in promoting and facilitating them. Strong leadership by businesses supporting the collaborative approaches can help unlock the necessary investments, and together with higher education institutions, academia, and professional education bodies, they can provide access to quality learning opportunities and their availability also in the various languages they're needed in. The ZDHC Academy builds this community and collaborative awareness and responsibility for practical, impactful, lifelong learning opportunities. So let's hear from our panelists, their experience with challenges, best practices, and let's hear their stories and learn about our own. Thank you. So I hand back over to Mariella and to our lovely panel.
Thank you, Klaas. And while you were talking about the ZDHC Academy, and of course, as a lead of the Academy, I'm very proud of what we're developing. And we have started actually the whole journey of the ZDHC Academy already in 2017, creating curriculum, working on aligned approaches for training in our industry. However, mostly focusing, by the way, on safer chemical management, wastewater treatment, and wastewater management. However, while we were preparing this session, and we've been preparing it already for a couple of weeks, we did also discuss a lot about limitations that we actually have still in our community around training and education, awareness raising, and we bumped into them, although we thought, I mean, we're on a good track. But there is still some gaps that we also need to tackle in this field. So while we were talking, and I know some of the brands directly connected to that topic, we were looking at those limitations in terms of the challenges that we have in training and education in our sector. And I was just wondering, just in this case, to one of the brands, Marion, Hugo Boss, what type of limitations are we actually seeing the most when it comes to this topic?
Well, actually, I think it's quite a good question. And what we have seen so far, and also bear in mind for everybody who doesn't know ZDHC, we are talking about a tool that is fairly recent. And like Mariella has said, the Academy was only founded in 2017, which is fairly recent. So we always need to keep this in mind in terms of development. So one of the challenges we have seen actually is that all the tools at the moment have been developed in English. And that may seem very simple at first, but that's because it's the language of the broadest reach. However, not everybody in the textile supply chain can actually speak English to the point that they can follow very specific topic training on their area of knowledge, for example, or when they want to develop new knowledge, maybe they haven't got the language skills to follow them. So that's one of the limitations we see the capacity building. However, we know that with now growing a lot of new service providers, we can also increase the number of translation. So we can see already a major improvement in the amount of reach that we can have with those trainings. The second aspect as well that we can see quite often is that the trainings cover general information. So what would happen if you take the example of a training on wastewater testing, what happens in case of failures, what to do? However, very often when suppliers may have an issue, so a failure in their wastewater, it is very often the exceptional case, the ones that are not covered in the training. And this is something where we would see that would be very helpful for them to have a tool, for example, to learn based on case studies, kind of a peer-to-peer type of information that is shared, so that it could help them to conduct root cause analysis and therefore provide corrective action plans. So having training on those topics can actually enable the whole supply chain to proactively put measures into place to limit those failures when we discussed wastewater testing. And we hope that in the future, this will be implemented via the supplier platform so that more knowledge can be shared in the future.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is it's not only in this case the availability in certain languages or on a regional basis of training that we're growing now with our service providers, but it's also certain topics that could still be covered that are not covered yet, that give a very practical solution to the industry to tackling some of their issues, right? And so I mean, you are at WWF, you do a lot of implementation projects. What are the type of topics that we are actually missing currently in curriculum that we really need to explore and build still? What is lacking in terms of the educational scope of what we do?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mariella. And I'm great to see the number of our participants is more than 206. So which is quite, a topic of the interest for everybody. I will also emphasize on as Marianne mentioned about, and as per your question, Mariella, about the data availability, which is something, and if we link it with the knowledge at the local level, because sometimes, yes, the standards are available and the implementation is a question. Why? Because the on ground, the implementers, they don't have enough knowledge about the standard, because this is something which is actually it is faced. So to incorporate into the curriculum is one option where, whatever the practical knowledge of the standards or of the know-how is there, it should be incorporated at that level into the different curriculum or at that level, because whenever the industry or the people who got the training, they are sometimes having the customized, the challenges on ground. The standard, for example, any standard, either it's ZDHC or the others. So the standard is there, but sometimes the implementation on ground becomes challenging for the implementers. So in that case, sometimes the local level customized training programs should be part of that, as well as what are the steps which are quite pertinent for the implementation. I can just quote an example of the latest standard of the ZDHC sludge waste management, how to manage that and move on. So this is something, as an example on ground, how to implement on ground and how it could be incorporated into the curriculum that could be, taken up in the coming future.
Yeah, and I think that's a very practical approach to it, right? So identifying what in local communities is actually missing in terms of education to bridge certain gaps that we might think we already are tackling in other regions potentially is something that we can clearly identify with the implementation projects that we're doing, for example, with WWF or with the GIZ or other partners that we work with, UNIDO, for example. There's a lot of information coming out of these implementation projects. However, what is interesting sometimes as well, and we've been discussing this actually in the past 2 days during the water conference already, is that there's a lot of things that we can build. There is a lot of institutions that we can work together with in terms of education. We can build a lot of curriculum. We can give access to those curricula. However, when does that actually, how does that work in terms of changing particular behavior on the ground? When are people triggered to actually change? I think that was something that we were discussing as well in some of the pre-sessions with you, Carlos. So how does that work? Do we need a certain critical mass? How should we have a look at what that tipping point is? Is there a way or an approach that we can do that? Because I know that you were very interested in that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mariella. very good and interesting question, but it also links to the previous comment from Sohail. In this case, we have to ensure that we have the people with the critical thinking, because it is not only about implementing what has been successful in other locations, but also to do it in a critical manner, in such a way that the knowledge can be adapted to the local conditions, and it goes beyond just copying the standards, because it may imply to consider environmental conditions, to consider the local situation, even some aspects that are not technologically driven, but mostly from anthropological or social aspects that need to be considered to increase the success of the implementation of those actions or of those technologies. And to really induce that behavior change, it is a long-term process. Behavior change means that the actions, the activities have been already adopted at long term. And to keep it at long term, it needs, or we need to work at different levels, from the operators up to the management positions. So everyone understands the concepts, understands the goals, and that everyone can also perceive and get the benefits out of it. And they cannot be only economic benefits. I'm also talking about benefits in terms of producing more with less, recovering resources, also recovering resources in a symbiotic manner, because what maybe for me is an excess, for another companies can be a raw material that can be used. And when everybody gets engaged into that circular economy, when all those aspects are considered, is when we could have that change in the behavior. And of course, we have to have the reinforcement at long term to keep the success and the flow going.
I think one thing you were saying about the sustaining basically the development and the critical thinking within the industry, and making use of the people that are the critical thinkers and could steer certain behavioral change. Before I go back to Sohail, because there was something that linked to that as well. What is the role? And I know we didn't prepare this question, Carlos, so it's sorry to put you on the spot, but what is the role of the students here? Because you're actually teaching students coming from all different regions. And they're, of course, the operators of tomorrow. So how do we include them and support them the best to actually take up that role?
The students or can be our best ambassadors, because they come with fresh minds. They come with a different vision of the current situation and about the future. They are learning in many cases the latest advances, the latest technologies. And they go back and they come with a much more fresh, but also with the enthusiasm, with the dynamism that it requires to work hard. And that's how they can be the best ambassadors for the successful implementation of all these actions.
Yeah, I think, and Claudio, yesterday was one of the events of the WWF that included actually a lot of students, and I will come back to you later about students and education and the work that WWF is doing on that. But what was fun to see is that there was a group of students there presenting their developments, their PhD studies, their theses on topics within the wastewater industry, but as well in our industry, in the textile industry, and their enthusiasm and their open mind and thinking out of the box is of course very important, because at some point we sometimes get tunnel vision by what we already know. The thing that was linking me to Sohail was when Carlos was talking about the knowledge and also the regional knowledge, and potentially also regional students that are actually looking into the problems in their own area. What do we actually already know enough, Sohail, to on the ground of what we need to improve and where we need to build awareness of on, or is there also still a really big gap still in what we know and what we can measure?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Mariella, about the knowledge gap and the on ground the realities. Yes, like WWF being the conservation organization, we always emphasize to reduce the footprint, and this is something sometimes the data availability is there, sometimes the in the developing country, which is my experience, sometimes we even don't know what to reduce within the production process. Like sometimes the businesses, they really want to do something to reduce their footprint, but they don't know how to do that. One of the reason is the local, the standards are not available. For example, if you want to reduce the X amount of the water from your production process, or reduce the impact at the end of the pipeline or within your production line, sometimes the existence of standard is an issue. Yes, sometimes the brand supplier, yes, they are following the international standards, but sometimes in the developing countries, they don't have the standards, just like the cleaner production standards or something like that. So this is quite a point of interest, because whenever if you measure, then you can reduce. So that is something, the formalization of these kinds of the standards on ground, like what is the impact on the environment, or what is the the target, how to reduce that. That is something, and it could be linked with the research, with the academia, and developing that kinds of the guideline at the local level to reduce that. And for sure, government can play their role at the policy level to publish those standards, and then it could be linked and developing the targets. Because if you see into the market, you can see, I used to say, like we are having 3 tiers at the global level. One, in terms of the producers, one is the export oriented businesses, which are following the international standards, either if at the developing countries or the local level the standards are available or not, but they are having state of the art businesses and they are running. The others are the followers. They are partially compliant with the the international standards and the at the local level. But the major chunk is the at the lower level, like they don't know what to do on ground. Sometimes it's the knowledge gap, sometimes it's the capacity gap, sometimes it's the implementation gap. So this is all the 3 points which we need to address in those areas, and then they can adopt at that level.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that measurement is actually extremely important to be able to for all of us. And I think what is actually quite interesting, and now moving to Sharif, I mean, as a brand, you do try to measure, you do try to get data. How are you coping with that? Is there already enough? Should there be more tools to actually create more data? And what is actually the barrier currently that you see to get more data, to be able to look at the state of the industry in terms of wastewater, effluent treatment, water?
Thank you, Maren, and thank you, Mariella. And probably I will bring more of the ground experience on these questions and connecting to what just mentioned by Sohail. I think the first point that I like to kind of share is that the industry, the apparel and textile and the leather industry, doesn't have a kind of a industry accepted benchmarking of different processes. For examples, we do not have a kind of an industry standards, how much water should be consumed by neat industries or neat products, how much water should be consumed for a woven or a kind of a denim. We hear and we saw from your presentations that this much of water have been consumed or used in denim, but is that a right standards? Because there are a lot of variations and differences between the washes for the denim. So each of them are been not alike, and there are quite a lot of differences. So I feel that there is a kind of, and it's not impossible. There are not thousands of processes in the textile. So there are probably less than 50 major processes in textile and the leather, which can be easily benchmarked in terms of water consumption. That is number one. And the second point that but where we have seen from our way of working perspective, that there is a lack of standardizations around pollution load. We understand that JDHC has been published a kind of a treatment technologies on the wastewater treatment, but that document is missing the what kind of pollution load we can expect from a different kind of industries, and that is the basis of how we design the ETP. And I see that there is a big differences when our business partner are been planning for their ETPs or kind of a revamping even their capacities and forecasting the future. They are not been able to do that. So right now, if I have 20 tons capacity, if I'm like to go on 40 ton capacity, what should be my increase in terms of my pollution load and the capacity? So that's something I feel that it's kind of as an industry we should come forward and make a kind of an effort to make an standards. But last but not least, I also kind of pointed out the bigger challenges that we face in our supply chain is that there are differences between how you will achieve a foundational level of wastewater quality and then how we will go for the progressive one. These cannot be achieved by the same treatment technologies. So there is a fundamental differences how you will take care of your wastewater quality when it comes to you want to achieve the foundational, but we aim to be more kind of aspirational and go forward and continuously improve the performances. So, but then there is a clear knowledge gap and of course the data gap, how a business partner can move from foundational performance to the progressive one and eventually in the near future towards the aspirational one. And I think if those have been there, some I mean, a lot of the kind of limitations that we have been talked about, I think it will be kind of giving an open knowledge platforms to everyone to plan their own improvements. Thank you, Marla.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I see Manuel already nodding. So
yeah, because I mean, this is something like this, like our daily bread, let's say, I think that it's very important to talk about also about the role of laboratories and the facilities, the manufacturing facilities, right? The factories. Because first of all, you have to know your water, right? So you have to know what you have. You have to have the analysis, because based on that, then you will be able to choose what technologies you can apply and how you are going to reach the foundational, progressive, or aspirational parameters that you need to achieve. It's it's just a series of analysis that you need to do in order to know how to achieve that goal, but also to know how much energy, how much amount, I mean, the amount of chemicals that you're going to use to it, because we need to look at this holistically, right? Not just to reach the outlet at any cost. We need to reach the outlet in a more environmentally friendly fashion so that we have a lower carbon footprint, and we have a lower energy consumption. So but all this starts from the labs, right? From the value, from the data that you get. So it's important that we have the labs, but we also know that in many countries and in many regions, there are no local labs available or no local certified labs. So there is the opportunity here, because I mean, it's not only an issue, but it's an opportunity for the manufacturing units to have in-house testing facilities. They might not be as precise as the verified or certified labs, but they will give you a good insight into what you really have in your wastewater in order to give the proper treatment to it. And this is also where the role of education comes in, because we have to train, we have to share the knowledge, not only about the wastewater technologies, but also about testing. We have to think it as a global issue. I mean, from the inlet point to the outlet point of the wastewater treatment, but also beyond. And that means the lab. To have a day-to-day, to have, like a daily record of what you are getting and what you are giving to the environment, right? So that way you can choose your technology, you can do whatever you need in order to reach that goal, but without having an excessive chemical consumption or an excessive energy consumption. So this is, I think that the lab's role is very important in this, because that's where all starts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think we have actually one organization here involved as well who has a lab. I'm looking at Anaga. I mean, Nimkertech, is also has its own laboratory, but is a training provider as well. You also educate the people in the industry, work together with brands, with suppliers within the industry, but as a laboratory, you have a certain availability as well of gathering data and looking at those gaps. So what do you see your role is in there, and how do you try to use both sides of the organization to actually improve the education?
Yeah, so Mariella, thank you. I agree with Manuel what he said. Basically, if you have to choose wastewater treatment measures, you need to know and you need to measure what is actually in your wastewater. And for this, labs are the most important in capturing actually what ground level information is there in wastewater monitoring. But there are so many challenges when it actually comes to having a lab to monitor wastewater on a global scale. First of all, we don't have labs in multiple locations. So this is a very big problem because labs are completely missing in countries which have now become production countries. And in such situations, mills actually have to take water and send this to a laboratory, which is probably very, very far away, maybe even in a different country where it will get stuck in customs for so many months. And by the time it reaches the lab for analysis, so many contaminants degrade or they break down, and the actual tests may not present a very accurate snapshot of the facility's water health, right? Not to mention, it's really expensive to ship water samples to another location. It's very, very costly.
Yeah.
So another challenge that laboratories face is in sampling and handling of the wastewater. So whatever wastewater you take, it has to be a very representative sample that is sent to the lab, because otherwise, what you test is not what you are actually, what you see in the facility. And even during transit, the sample has to be handled in such a way that there is no significant change in its composition before the testing or the analysis is done. And one of the things which I feel, is required is that even the laboratory sampling team and the analysis team should be actually trained in this area. And laboratories should make sure that only trained, experienced people are sent out for sampling wastewater. A third, I think a third challenge I would like to add here is that the wastewater matrix is a very dirty matrix. It's a very complicated, complex matrix full of, so many chemicals that are used during its processing and production stages. And every lab has to have that specialization to interpret this data. So, whatever graphs you get even on the machines, you need to make sure that you're able to interpret this in order to provide a very comprehensive, thorough test report. And again, for this, we need to build expertise because not all laboratories have this interpretational skills. So I think from the lab point, there are a few challenges which we need to address even when it comes to, a holistic wastewater management treatment solution.
And I think in the implementation, we see a lot of those challenges coming back. And I saw Sohail nodding and I saw Sharif nodding already. Does anyone like to comment on that? In terms of, okay, so we think everything is there. We assume everything is there, but there is a lack of laboratories in certain regions, and there is a gap in certain capacity of labs or certain knowledge of labs. Sharif, Sohail, I don't know which one of you would like to answer first, but I saw you nodding, so I think you had something to say.
I think I do agree with Anaga's point, and this is one of the most challenging things, the labs, and she rightly mentioned, sometimes if you don't measure exactly, you cannot reduce and you cannot achieve the targets at the industry level. This is, the first step. We really need to, if the labs are up to the date and technology is available, yes, then it's the first step towards the improvement, and I would say towards the sustainability. It's the first step to move on to that journey. So yes, these challenges exist there, and sometimes the lab sampling and these kinds, and sometimes the weather pattern also sometimes affect the wastewater sampling and the others. So this is the conversation in the different technical teams where we actually experienced like the state of the art lab is a challenge in several parts of the world. And if it is there, then it can move on towards the next idea, like what the solution should be, what the innovative technologies should be, which could be opted in, those could be made, because then the other, the steps can jump in. Thank you.
And probably, Mariela, I will just add on with Sohail, but probably in a different areas, not in the lab, but on the treatment technologies. I would say that the ETP or wastewater treatment technologies are not been evolving the speed of invention that has been happening in the current world. I mean, all the technology that are being deployed in the wastewater treatment, activated sludge, MBR, those are kind of a 70s or 80s kind of a technology that has been invented at that point of time, and we are being still continue to kind of apply those things successfully. But then I feel that the way mobile phone has been kicked out, watch, camera, digital camera, SLR, so quickly, we do not see that speed of innovations in the field of wastewater treatment. And that is something I would like you to take a point on, and then probably we can back on the academia. What are the kind of those missing links so that we can sensitize our researcher to kind of look into those things? And not only the wastewater treatment. If we are looking at the recycling treatment, these RO techniques, filtrations, these are kind of not evolving in a way that should give us the kind of the business case of deploying those solutions. Like if we have been talking about the recycling, that would eventually means us additional costing, additional energy uses, and additional chemical cost. But is there anything that we should think about and pave the way for innovations so that recycling would be so obvious that every business partner would obviously think about recycling rather than just treating the wastewater and discharging it to the environment? That's a kind of a point that I would like to make towards all.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Sharif. And it's actually linking back to one of the discussions that we had at the WWF yesterday as well. So it's a very good point. I will take that back to Claudio later too. Jimmy, I saw you kind of diplomatically raising your hand.
Yeah, and as a manufacturer, so we manufacture fabrics and threads and denim around the world, and we have our own wastewater treatment systems, and being a company that was originally based in the U.S., where a lot of textiles were in Europe, and now has moved out throughout the world. We have and developed through the years a lot of expertise and knowledge about just basic wastewater treatment, even as the technology continues to progress and improve. And as Sharif was noting, what I see from my standpoint is the technology or the consulting knowledge hasn't made it to the zones where the wastewater treatment, the textile operations, the apparel, footwear operations are, and the laboratories. There aren't enough laboratories that can that can service us, especially related to the ZDHC MRSL, and so that's something we really do need to solve for. But one really beautiful thing about the Academy and ZDHC is that it's a place where this knowledge is being pooled and then can be shared, because this is something that there shouldn't be any competitiveness going on in sharing best practices and sharing knowledge and taking what where we're some areas of the world where we're rich in this knowledge and this experience and this what we've developed through just experience, and share it so that it's accessible to everybody. And that's a challenge, but that's a beautiful thing about the Academy and what ZDHC is doing.
I think a very important point that you raise here is the access, right? The access to training and the knowledge. And it's definitely a challenge. I think as an academy, you see that you can scale, you see that you can offer things online. I mean, for instance, DimProtect is also offering online training, which is more easily accessible. But of course, you want to spread it as much as possible. You want to educate as many people as possible around the world, even in regions where it's harder to connect to, which in the end, and now I know that, I mean, GIZ is also doing a lot of public-private partnership, that will also need resources, government support, et cetera, how, Gundolf, because we haven't been talking to you yet, so what would be the role of the government and other funding partners to actually make sure that we can scale this work of, you know, of this educational work that we try to do, and that also GIZ is trying to do?
Yeah, thank you, Mariella. Well, it was already mentioned that a lot of knowledge actually is missing on the ground at the factory level, and that's also what I have seen already. Yeah, just to give a practical example, if I see in a factory is telling me that they are compliant with the aspirational level of ZDHC, then I'm already a little bit skeptic. So, and all the treatment plants I have visited in Bangladesh, Pakistan, China, recently in the last year where I was working, none of them was really fully operational in a proper way. And that is for several reasons. And that is here where we are trying to start in, is we're trying to provide scalable knowledge measures products which can train people. So recently we have conducted a huge training program on chemical management, accordingly international requirements, mainly referring to ZDHC, which now is available and which has shown it is possible also to go for scale. And that is actually what we have to do at the end. We have to consider the individual needs, provide scalable solutions and easy accessible knowledge. And that is, for example, which can be done by, it's not the time anymore just doing virtual physical trainings one by one, being there at the end. So that means we have to provide solutions which are easily accessible, like e-learning trainings, which consider and can be used, the different needs, considers the different needs and can be used tailor-made accordingly to specific needs. Sorry, I don't know if you hear a lot of background noises at the mosque next to my room at the moment.
It shows how international we are.
yeah, exactly. So I hope I'm still audible. So, and that is a bit what we're trying to, where we start in and coming in from the governmental side with public funded funds, identify new solutions, identifying partners which then can take it up for the scale. And just for example, referring back to the chemical management, and that is what we have seen. And yeah, we heard it today already. Local language is available. Marion, you said it, yeah? And that's why we have translated the chemical management in several local languages. It's not only English anymore. It's available in Turkish, it's available in Bengali, in Urdu, in Mandarin, Vietnamese, so on. And that is actually what we need to provide the solutions with easy access. And also, of course, transparency, yeah, and also making sure how it works and not always striving for being the best, acknowledge already what's achieved. So we are still lacking behind achieving the foundational level on the broad scale. Coming to that would be already good access. And to acknowledge this achievement, we also need more understanding, not only on the production side, also on the buyer side. How many brands can really understand in ZDHC test water certificate? What means chemical oxidant demand? What means biological oxidant demand? If they just said progressive, aspirational, everybody's happy. But you have to understand what's behind. And it is not a way like punish everyone. It's more like, okay, acknowledge achievements, and now let's see how can we go further from here on.
And that actually also has to do with if we talk about, for instance, the brand knowledge, or you know, so not only at the facility level, I'm talking about both actually, but even maybe at the governmental level, that is actually also why it's so important, I guess, Carlos, to already involve students at an early stage, because they are the ones in the end moving towards the industry and working at the brands, at the facilities, on the ground, at the laboratories. So to actually take them, into the journey earlier, instead of training people when they're already on the job. Next to that, of course, which is extremely important.
Yeah, yes, indeed, it is important that we can have fresh, new, dynamic engineers that can start to take up all the new knowledge and put it into practice. And they are pretty much aware of the latest developments. And they also understand the current situation in terms of the advances in technology, the advances in many different means of communication that we have nowadays. And regarding the role of the government can enhance all these educational plans. But of course, they should be within a certain enabling environment towards defined goals, and most of the goals can be related directly to the SDGs in terms of water, in terms of protecting the environment, in terms of development in an environmentally responsible way.
Yeah, so this is actually maybe also a call out that we need to do a bit more during this week as well, to actually have that government support more ready to make that industry change. And I think that's a point that came up also in some of the other events already as well. So it could be a kind of a red thread that's coming through. And in terms of, because we already answered some of the questions that around technology and the availability, that is not always available everywhere, that people are always up to date about what is available and how they can access it. And I was just wondering, because we yesterday had some good conversations with the Water Environmental Federation, you guys actually sometimes, when it comes to smaller technologies or things that are actually applicable within the industry, I think last time on one of the websites I saw something like, if you're interested in receiving for free this thing for measurement or something like that, call us or send us a message. What does the WEF do to actually enhance the knowledge of supply chains and to offer them access to certain information about new technology? I mean, the WEF tech is huge. There's a lot of technology available there. What is the role of the WEF specifically in that? And it's not only in the US. I mean, it's global.
Thank you, Mariella. I appreciate very much a lot of the input here. And I think as we have continued this conversation and get a little deeper on the education side, we can address some of those. But I think at a broad stroke, I would say that it has to be sustained pushing out of information. We have plenty of experience in other areas where we are trying to change the culture, we're trying to change the mentality about a particular topic. Take wipes, for example. We try to educate people that you can't flush a wipe, okay? And to do that, the people that were successful are the municipalities, government, and other shared experiences that were sustained over time, just like recycling and the change of a generation. You had to educate a whole generation for that to happen. And so WEF, the way WEF tries to do that is making sure we're bringing knowledge to our as much local knowledge as we can. And folks touch base on this as at the manufacturing facility level. What WEF has done is through its affiliates. We have affiliates in every state, 3 counties in 30 countries. So what we try to do is get as much information out to those folks at the local level as we can. Now, we have to also taken advantage of governmental programs that support training for small communities. And we are in the process of doing some pilots right now on just that. And that means you have to go sometimes to areas of the country and provide some of their workshops. I know we heard here about technology. We heard here about you're not going to be able to go and educate everybody in person. That we share that. But we also know from other programs that we've done that certain level of knowledge, for example, at the facility base, there is a big chunk of that knowledge can be done remotely. But at some point in time, we learned with our wastewater-based epidemiology program, wastewater-based surveillance for COVID, working with CDC in 20 prisons across the country, that that a lot could be done virtually, a lot could be done through checklists. But at some point in time, we had to show up at the facility, and you had to give them the opportunity to do some testing, some hands-on. Just like schools and high schools and colleges, they have laboratories and they test them on hand. You have to do a lot of that as well. How to do that? That's where it gets tricky right now. And we understand that. And I know folks in this group and people listening here know that. But I think that it's in a way, it's going to have to be hybrid. We learned that too with our inflow program, which is trying to bring STEM students and college students into the wastewater sector. We're learning all these lessons that when you bring them together, it's going to be a concerted, sustained effort over time in a hybrid manner.
Yeah, yeah. I think somebody was saying a similar thing yesterday, where they said, in the end, you know, even at the kids level, giving them the tools to actually do smaller kits, you know, to actually test with wastewater. I think it was you, class, that gave an example about kids being able already to be educated with their little wastewater kits, you know, on the ground. So like, from what age on, from which age, it doesn't really matter. I think the practical approach of on the ground training at whatever age you're at, even at high school or at university or whatever, it supports your knowledge uptake. So for sure, I mean, we're doing a lot of training online.
Right.
But in the end, that hybrid approach, and I know that some of the training providers that are here are completely supportive of that hybrid approach as well. It's the point that people can start to ask really good questions, that they can start to work on the ground with the things that they have learned, applying cases. And I think that's definitely something that's to be stimulated. But indeed, the challenge is it's harder to scale, of course.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting because you were talking about the students, and I saw a question as well from Margaret Fry from Cornell, who was talking about, okay, so how can we support, you know, the students that are working in this or studying in this area? I think the question was actually already answered at some point, but I'm picking it back up. Jimmy indeed also answered it. Margaret said, how should university curriculum for designers, product development, and business students planning to enter the fashion industry be updated and improved to prepare students to think about sustainability and water management more? And I mean, we as an academy try to get engaged as much as possible with universities on these topics to create more awareness in the sector. But I know WWF is doing a similar thing as well. So how do you try to engage with universities to basically include that in their curriculum, or make them aware that they need to include that or improve that from WWF side?
WWF has, we do have a strong engineering community that is active within our membership. That does give us some access to a lot of them are professors, a lot of them are parts of universities are active within research. We have a partnership with the Research Foundation as well that does have access to the research side of things, and that sometimes does help. We also we also think that Envision program, which is a credentialing program for the engineering firms have been using, where you go in that sustainability piece of that. Now, it doesn't address the specific part of Margaret's question, which is that the textile sector, right? So that's something that I think maybe an area of collaboration between ZDHC Academy and WWF. Because of that kind of reach. We have also created another thing that has helped to some extent in other areas, like when people mentioned recycling and reuse. WWF has created some roadmaps that are specifically related to how to achieve certain things. I noticed there was also one or two questions related to, well, how do we get there, right? And there's some early discussion about too, how do you get there? You don't always know, even at the facility level, where to start. These roadmaps are designed to to be used by folks that are in all levels. If you've never thought of reuse, you'll be over here and you start earlier, right? If you have been thinking about it or already implemented some kind of reuse program or initiative, you start in a different place. And the roadmap talks about what the technologies available are, what the regulatory infrastructure is, and what you need to think about. Also, you know, other things to think about in terms of operations. So I think that we can do more of those, maybe even develop a roadmap for the textile sector that is focused on just these kinds of questions. So I think there is room here for us to be able to collaborate using ideas and thoughts and programs and initiatives that we've learned from. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel either.
Exactly. And I think, Jimmy, I don't know if you would like to answer part of it as well live, but I think your answer of indeed maybe getting students involved in, you know, understanding these types of roadmaps and understanding and being more aware of the actual challenges in the industry is already a good start, right? Before and then integrating that in their curriculum.
Yeah, and I think as designers and as students that are learning to be designers and other similar jobs, having an appreciation and understanding of what are the supply chain impacts, what are the facility impacts, and I think that's becoming more like for greenhouse gases and for materials, you know, recycled materials, cotton, those things. It's becoming more and more. They're becoming more aware of that. But I think on the water side, they need to be very aware of the impacts of their design choices, and that there's no free lunch. You know, that there are impacts, and even when we're using conformant chemistry and good chemistry, it's still chemistry, and it still has to be treated properly. And you know, there's no magic. It's you know, there is you know, it has to be treated. Even when we have recycling, that all has to be done properly too. And there's in fact a lot more technology and a lot more challenge to operate that correctly. So just having an understanding of all that is going on, you know, and it's still you know, we still are a very water intensive industry. And I mean, the reality is we will be for some time, even as other technologies come online. But, you know, for now and for the, you know, next, you know, many years, we're water intensive. And so just having the understanding of that and appreciation of that, I think is important.
Thanks. Yeah,
I totally agree. Jimmy, I like your answer very much in writing as well. I hadn't seen it before I thought I spoke, but you're right. I mean, but you know, necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so look in California. So just let's talk about California for a second here, right? There are the cost of water, right? The cost of water as things become more scarce and as climate change accelerates that. And I think you're going to see that certain ideas that before were unthinkable because they were too expensive may change. And that, as you say, you know the sector, so it's possible that the sector located its facilities in places where that is going to be a while before that happens. And indeed they did that. That's smart because that's what you should be doing. But I think as water becomes more scarce across the globe, as climate change accelerate things, and we're not that resilient as we should be, I think the certain options might become attractive that they may not be today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And I think that will be a very big trigger in the end. Unfortunately, before we go, I would love to talk about the challenges, maybe even more than 2 hours long. But we do want to also have a really close look at the progress and the solutions that are, of course, already out there, because that's what we want to share as well. Before we do that, we will answer one additional question from our Q&A, and then we will move to the progress. I will hand over to Klaas, who will dive into that a bit more. So Klaas, do you also want to actually provide an answer to one of the live questions as well that is still pending?
Yeah, there's one question still on the supplier representatives in the dialogue with ZDHC and in this whole learning process. And I think as Jimmy is here, And we have suppliers on the panel. Basically, it's a sign of how inclusive and also peer-to-peer these approaches are. So the value of availability of self-learning programs such as the Supplier to Zero, or also the GIZ offer of the ERMC are great to facilitate the kickstart into the implementation. But the value of the academy and training and development programs is really bringing together people with the different set of capabilities, perspectives, and also with a different mindset. And that's the trainers, that's also the participants in the room. Is it a virtual room or is it like a physical room? The setup really doesn't matter, but it's the communication, it's the exchange of ideas that really facilitates also the awareness building and the drive for the change in the end. So just wanted to highlight that. And in ZDHC, we have supplier contributors. We have tons of suppliers involved in the regional conferences, so that really we are trying to provide the voice also to this very much important stakeholder of this conversation. And let's have a look now at progress and proven solutions. So clear enough. I mean, we heard about it. There are challenges, and all of these need to be tackled ideally already tomorrow. But we also know we're not starting from scratch. So we are seeing progress already. The industry is moving, right? So Elena, what do you have to contribute to this piece of thought? I know that you have something on mind there.
Yeah, I just wanted, well, thanks for inviting us. It is great to be here. I just wanted to highlight, as part of the progress made, that even though I agree with all the challenges that have been shared in the section before, I think we need to value one of the greatest strengths in the industry, which is this aligned framework. And we have mentioned before in the session the ZDHC Wastewater Guidelines, but it is a lot beyond that. So it was mentioned in the introductory video, for example, the MRSL, so that's the manufacturing restricted substance list. So that basically is to control the chemical inputs into the manufacturing processes to ensure that you don't see anything that you don't want to see at the end in the discharge. But also it's everything in between. So that's inputs and outputs. And then we've got everything in between, like the ZDHC chemical management system. We have developed ETP operator training and wastewater technologies compilation, etc., etc. So I think this is a unique example of industry collaboration. And why I think this is very relevant to the topic today, the role of education, is because I think this alignment has been instrumental in knowledge sharing and also creating peer-to-peer networks and in general, more broadly in the industry, like brands, suppliers, technology and training providers, consultants. So this shared framework has provided a common language, which I think it is a very important starting point, and also a common end goal. So then curricula can be built around it. And also, very importantly, this sense of common purpose and shared responsibility amongst different stakeholders, I think can also be a motivation to engage stakeholders into taking part in education and training programs. So I just wanted to highlight that, yeah, there are challenges, but I think we've made good progress as well.
Sorry, muted, classic. So we already heard about this a bit earlier, but how does this relate also to lab capacity and alignment and field work? And maybe Sharif or Carlos, you have an opinion about this to share.
I can go first, Carlos. When we hear a lot of challenges, we probably hear that, I mean, there is no kind of or not adequate solutions. But I think we have been dealing with a very big vacuum of knowledge, or the kind of gap of knowledge. And in that sense, I think the JDC engagement, what has been kind of we achieved together as an industry is that we now have a more uniform standards. We as a kind of since we have been working on many different countries, we know that each countries have their own kind of a discharge quality and standards, which is not been kind of aligned or kind of is not a it doesn't give us a kind of a performance look towards looking or judging the performance of our business partners. So the adopting the JDHC standards has been first of all giving us the unique standards that should be applied for all apparel and textile, irrespective of their locations. So that's a kind of a we consider that as an kind of a starting points. But from that, we also kind of looked at or went through the lab approval, so that the JDC approved lab has a certain methodology, and they follow a certain methodology for testing each of the parameter that has been listed. And there is a kind of a certain framework of sampling and also the results and all those things. So those kind of approval of the lab and the qualification of the lab is extremely important, which we have been talked briefly in the challenges sections, because not all the labs are in the same level of performance or kind of have an accepted performance level. Having said that, I think in terms of knowledge gap, I would also mention that JDS has been come up with this very good guideline on the sludge, which has been kind of a big knowledge gap where we have been trying to kind of fill the gap in. So I think it's not only in the lab capacity or the alignment of our work, but it's irrespective of the whole area of working that has been needed. Like what are the knowledge gap in terms of certain techniques, what are the knowledge gap in terms of the labs and kind of a testing methodology, and what is the gaps when how we can deploy the same method or same standards for everyone. JDC standards or JDC collaborations played a kind of a vital role to consider our progress so far.
May I?
Carlos, anything to add to this?
Yeah, thanks, Klaas. Yeah, I coincide pretty much with the vision of Sharif. I would like to mention, in addition to that, we need different types of laboratories, because the labs are needed for several purposes. We can have laboratories that are going to be useful to have the day-to-day evaluation assessment of the processes. So those should be like a smaller laboratories that are equipped with the required materials, etc., needed for doing those type of analysis. But also there should be, depending on the location, depending on the importance, different levels with different capacities. So there should be the day-to-day, there should be some other laboratories that are more, let's say, with more capacity to start to do different types of assessments with much more equipment. For example, some other parameters, maybe related to microplastics, maybe related to different types of emerging contaminants, different types of processes to do the analysis. Those cannot be done in situ. Those have to be more like done under special conditions in the special locations. There are also expensive systems that need a much more qualified personnel, and that was only in the analytical part. In addition to the analytical part, we need to think of different types of laboratories to provide the training. So laboratories where the people can learn how to do the trainings, people that can know how to implement those technologies in other locations, and also laboratories that perform research to assess different process technologies, to assess different approaches, practices for wastewater treatment. And there is even another level that can be related to provide technical support. So some wastewaters can be a bit more challenging, that cannot be really tested in situ. that need to have much more time required to assess the wastewaters, and that requires some other research facilities that need to be in another location. So it is a complete, like, let's say, an onion, a layer type of laboratories with different capacities, also different resources. And for that, could be interesting, could be important to develop a complete network, or maybe even think of the implementation of different types of hubs, depending on these locations, to define a specific chains in terms of collecting the samples, analyzing the samples, following the required procedures, etc. But also for the other 3-4 different situations, the technical support, the research, and the training. So it is quite important. The labs are essential. But also can have a lot of potential also for the implementation of new technologies.
Thank you. And we have actually a little competition here on with the panelists. And I'd like to hand over to Gundolf first, because he was faster with his hand up.
Sorry, Manuel, I will make it short so that you will also still have time. I just want to emphasize, on the one hand, of course, I don't want to neglect that laboratories are needed. Yeah. Also, Sharif, you said we need more innovative technology, as you said earlier today, and the innovation is not taking up same speed when it comes to wastewater treatment, considering other technologies. But I would like to emphasize really that we have to look on the humans behind that, using all the technologies. When I get a request from authorities for online live monitoring, we need more online live monitoring. We need more webcams on the treatment plants, etc. Yes, it's one piece which might be helpful. But when we look at the test results, which was made in very well equipped laboratories, I don't doubt that the analysis was not done in the proper way. It's more in a way, what comes in there? Have they taken the right samples? Do they understand really what they do and where they have to take this test? Or they do it on purpose, providing the wrong samples? Yeah, and I think here, that's the point. We have to focus really on what is ongoing on the ground during the production. And as I said, we have to ensure that the understanding is available on both sides, on the production side and on the producer side, also to prove if it's plausible what it's being reported from my suppliers. And of course, all this being more compliant with environmental requirements somehow costs money, but we have to think it in an integrated approach. If I'm using better chemicals which are less pollutants, I can save water, which is also cost saving. I can save energy, and that is somehow also how to make it more tasteful for the producer. Yeah, they also have to consider the economical benefit, and it's not like more to this, be more compliant with it. Yes, we need it, but also in a way why they should do it, and not just for it's all the way of being competitive in the future, of course, but how can they really take over all this and integrate it? That's a bit the question we have to consider.
Manuel, do you want to consider the Gundolf segment as well, or is yours referring to the previous meeting? Oh, okay, great, excellent.
Because I think that what Gundolf just said, is very important, because we need to look at the people who are behind the instruments, right? And I would like to link everything to what Carlos said before also, because he said that students come with a fresh mind. They are unbiased. So they can be the leaders of innovation. And I would like to link also to what Sharif said before about the technologies, because it's true. The wastewater technologies, the wastewater treatment technologies haven't been evolving as fast as other technologies. But why is that? I think that we have to take a multidisciplinary approach at this, because we cannot just take it at an academic, at a university's level, right? Or at a company level, but we have to involve the general public in this. This is also what Claudia was saying, right? About spreading information, raising awareness. This is also very important, because that way, we can work together. We can show some concrete commitments. We can create synergy between the multinational companies or the brands that are here, for example, which already have very strong sustainability and circularity policies. But many people don't know that. That's why we have to show that. That's why we have to start from the beginning, right? That's why I come back to the students. They can lead to innovation. But there is one puzzle piece missing here, the government. Because we need to involve the government so that along with the universities, the students, the brands, the end users, we can work together and innovate and create new technologies, right? Because we have to do this. I mean, otherwise we will just keep pointing the finger at each other, but we have to work hand in hand because otherwise this is not gonna work. So we really have to show this collaboration and then it will be pretty much doable. I mean, I would like to quote a phrase that I think everybody knows is that united we stand, divided we fall. And I would like to say that in this case, a united industry, a united academia, a united government, a united group of students and end users stand a chance about the huge changes that we have abroad. Because united as a group like that, we can have a chance. Divided, the environment falls and then everybody falls. That would be what I would like to comment on.
Thank you, Manuel. And I guess, Claudio, you also want to respond directly to the things that were stated in the previous statements.
Yes, just that, you know, there are many examples out there. We had a really recent one when we were doing the prisons wastewater surveillance for COVID, using a new technology, an on-site technology that took away from COVID results taking a week to come back and be actionable to taking 3 hours, right? So we were able to stop, in many prisons, able to stop outbreaks. That technology was developed just like that, right? Very fast, it moved fast because of necessity, right? But the technology was great, but we had operators in some of these prisons that they couldn't operate the laptop. Their fingers are too big. They couldn't touch the keyboard. They couldn't do it. So that was one problem we had to address. Another problem was some of them didn't have a mouse. We have to go get them a mouse. They're not, so I'm talking, so going back to this point of the human side of things, it gets sometimes to really basic logistics, right? And you have to think about that in a bigger picture. And so when you're thinking about technology and the laboratories that are necessary, the human component, so to emphasize that the human component is huge as it relates, and that was the piece I wanted to make, as it relates directly to the technology, right? And to what is it you're trying to have them use or do or test. So it's not just an overall thing of human impact, but also specific to what is it you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that you're actually stating that. As a sociologist, if people connect it to actually, you know, human behavior in the aspect of change, I mean, it's a critical piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
thank you.
Definitely the human behavior, the individuals, and so I also like to proceed and go to the next topic a little bit, and that's the role of the ZDHC Academy, what the Academy can do in this context. And I have a note here that says Marion would like to say something about that, if I'm not mistaken, and or otherwise I can also hand over to the next panelist. But Marion.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think for us and what we see a lot in actually for the whole supply chain, it's at some point when we want to learn, we want to be able to find one location where we can get all the training needed, because if we need to go to a platform, another one, etc., it starts to be a little bit complex. And that's how we see that the ZDHC Academy actually operates in a way. This is the one place where we can find all related trainings when it's about wastewater management, chemical management, and so on. And what we have seen, especially in the recent years, with the Academy becoming bigger and bigger, we've had also more and more training providers So that means we can cover more topics, more capacity, more people can be trained in more languages as well, but also in more topics. And that could be, for example, learning the very basics of wastewater, or really having a very, very detailed program on how to do an actual sampling, for example, for wastewater. That's what Gundolf was mentioning a little bit earlier, that people need to be fully trained to be able to do this, so that we don't see, for example, a contamination or another problem occurring that is just due to the sampling. So how we see actually that a lot of those trainings that are there, they are really helping and allowing the supply chain to learn, but not only once, but also to constantly develop themselves, to always have the most up-to-date knowledge. And I think actually we are quite lucky because we have Anaga as a panelist, and I think since she's a trainer, I think it will be super helpful to also hear her perspective here.
Yeah, thank you, Mariel. Yeah, I agree. So with the ZDHC Academy, Mariela, you may know, we've been associated since the very start, and I've seen it evolve into something which is really spectacular. Something like wastewater, it's not just the facilities concern, it should be everybody's problem. And we have to try and make training in such a way that we can change behavior. And I can see that the Academy is doing just that. So basically, we are trying to work towards, through the Academy, we're trying to make training courses that support and help facilities understand why they need to sample, why they need to test water, what needs to be done, how do you interpret a test report, and when can you do it? When should you do something like this? So I've seen the platform, really emerge as a go-to platform today for all of textile and leather industry stakeholders. And today, all of the most contemporary, most relevant training material is made available over here on the Academy. And through the years, I've also seen the platform adopt and apply and provide training in so many different formats. So today, if you go to the Academy, you will see webinars, you will see in-person workshops, you will see online training through e-learning, which is what we are doing. And it's giving suppliers and it's giving the other stakeholders a variety to choose from. So they can choose training in different languages, they can choose the methodology of when they want to take the training, how they want to take the training. And it's just making your learner base so much wider, and it's giving them easy access so they can do it in their own time, in their own, at their own pace. And it's increasing your potential learner community and the potential for ultimately raising awareness and thereby creating some sort of impact, right? Another thing which I've noticed through the platform is that training courses are continuously upgraded. So there is, it's not like a one size fits all approach. So even with the ETP operator course that is coming up soon, you will be having different levels of expertise, meant for operators, meant for supervisors, meant for managers. So it can be customized, it can be tailored to address your right audience. And this is where the maximum impact can be expected also. So yeah, training and education really plays a very, very important role in making sure that we have correct wastewater management at all levels.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for this comment and the contribution. I see also that in the Academy we are looking more and more into the capacities of the individuals, whereas in many cases in the context of wastewater we are always talking about the supplier, the manufacturer, as a unit, and also the challenges that this company, this entity is having. But yeah, it's important to look at the individuals. And I think one aspect is that we provide extensive training for the samplers that are working for the labs. This could also be extended, as we know, daily wastewater testing, weekly wastewater testing. There's enough of this also on the schedule of the suppliers and their operators. Which brings me actually to the next point, and maybe Jimmy, you would like to share something about what is coming up in the context of the ETP operators.
Yeah, so as I think we have several have alluded to earlier, there's we've all identified there's absolutely in general a knowledge gap, for wastewater treatment plant operators. And in my own company, that's something that we've really focused on and had, training programs to try to, to make sure that we're transferring this knowledge that we have to the people who need it at our facilities around the world. But as I've visited other other facilities and CETPs, and you see this great technology, but then it's the effluent coming out is horrible because the folks don't and they don't know what they don't know as far as running the treatment plant. So for this reason and others, a group at ZDHC has worked on a program for operator certification for ETP operators, and I think that it will be rolling out soon on the gateway, and this is essential. I mean, it's we're going to use it for our own people, and but to get that knowledge out there and to get it accessible, and then to have some type of measure to to understand, okay, do the people running the treatment plant, do they know it? And it's do they know what they need to know? And there will be different levels, and it will be based on the technology. Of course, the most basic levels is biological treatment and just the basic wastewater treatment concepts, but making sure that and several other things, but making sure that that those operators have that knowledge. And so I'm really excited about it. I think it's gonna be revolutionary in the industry. And from what I think what we've heard from WWF and others, I don't know that there's anything quite like this in other industries where the industry is bringing a tool and training and knowledge and then testing to the operators and making it accessible with all the challenges we have with languages and just basic knowledge and those kind of things. But I'm really excited to see the capacity that it's going to build at my own facilities, but also across the whole industry.
Thank you, Jimmy, for sharing this. Yeah, it's really exciting to see this coming together. If the start of this aligned approach is there, a global framework based on collaboration, what really makes it work? Maybe let's start again in the brand corner. So maybe either Marion or Elena, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, I can start, and then Elena can add on to what I'm going to say. Yeah, I think really having this collaboration, actually, Elena just shared about it a little bit earlier. I think it is so necessary, but also very valuable as well, because we have one common framework where we all work together, but not only us as brands, but also the whole supply chain, actually. And it also means that we are using the same kind of frameworks, the same kind of guidelines, which means that a supplier, manufacturer can be actually compared and working on the same level as another one, wherever they are in the world. And in this sense, I think it really allows them to be able to have their performance checked, but not only by government standards, let's say, or regulation standards, but really by what we as the whole supply chain can consider as a requirement to be better, to not pollute the environment, to have better treatment systems in the ETP, for example. So really having a common approach, common goals as well, to ensure that we are all working on the same and level playing field. And I don't know if maybe Elena, you want to add on to this?
Yeah, I think once we have the common framework, what makes it work, we've mentioned about the importance of having this alignment and also the training, but I think we also need sound implementation strategies. For example, monitoring and reporting at all levels also drive accountability. And to focus more specifically on the educational aspect of this, I think it is also very important, it was mentioned as part of the challenges section, to have not only high-level training, but also to focus on identifying practical solutions that our partners face, let's say at facility level. So for example, following with the point that was mentioned before in the challenge, I think Sharif mentioned about the different levels in the guidelines. So for example, foundational, progressive, and aspirational effluent quality levels. the question that training should help suppliers answer is, how can we move from where we are to where we want to be? What are the options to bridge that gap? And I think this requires a lot of collaboration with industry experts and technology suppliers, innovators. We were saying about the lack of innovators, and peer-to-peer collaboration, collaborative learning. And I don't want to put this as a challenge. I want to put this as a progress, because I think there's been a lot of progress made here. And in fact, the reason why we're all here together is because we're already collaborating on this. But I would like to know, maybe, I don't know, Jimmy from the implementer side, or Sharif from another branch perspective, if you agree with this, or what you feel about the framework and the implementation.
Yeah, Klaus, I'll jump in if that's okay. So yeah, I think, so what makes the framework and the collaboration work from my perspective as a supplier? And I think it's that, the right market signals have to be sent to suppliers. And so, it might seem counterintuitive, but so as a supplier that, is committed to doing the right thing, I want all brands to be, expecting that, to have the means in place to know exactly what we're doing and how we're doing, and are our operators trained? Are we, where are we in our ZDHC wastewater levels, and to hold us accountable, and hold all of our other suppliers accountable. And why is that? Well, and for why do I want that? For one thing, and somebody said in a question and answer, somebody asked the question, made the point that, these technologies, these amazing technologies that need to continue to develop, like, the wastewater recycling. We have 3 zero liquid discharge facilities. We're building another one this year, and we'll have 4. We have, UFRO systems. We're recycling a lot of wastewater, but it's expensive. It's still expensive. It is more expensive than traditional treat and release. And so, for us to do that, we have to know that, that the brands are sourcing from folks that are doing the same thing, and they're expecting the same thing, and they're not, the market is not sending signals that, cheap fabric, cheap footwear still wins out. We want you to do these things, but you're too expensive now. We need to, we're gonna have to, buy from somebody else. So, we certainly need to be as, cost competitive as we can be, but there has to be a floor, and the brands set that floor, and ultimately retail customers and others set that floor, but I think they're setting it. They expect, to be buying something from a supply chain that is doing the right things. And so we have to, make sure that, there's not a race to the bottom, that it's a race to the top. And so the beautiful thing is that the tools for brands to be able to do that they've not been in place, but now, through ZDHC, through these types of programs and the framework, now the tools are coming into place, and it's where the brands can access that information and have that information, and we can share it on the gateway with them. And so we want more of that, because that sets that sends that market signal that this is what our customers want. So that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy. Very important point that you raised here. Race to the top. That's what it's needed. But it all comes also with a certain business case. So very important point. And educating and building capacities to really understand not only the challenges, but also the methods to overcome these. To understand the business case potential are super important, maybe more important than ever in these times. So how do we really support suppliers to improve? And the operators to improve in this sense. Manuel, maybe I want to ask you about this because we had this conversation also lately.
Yeah, I mean, this is I think this is a very important point, and I would like to jump back to what Elena said, that maybe we know where we are now, but we really need a roadmap, right, to see where we want to be. Because I know the guidelines are not written in stone, right? They are dynamic. So we have to put together the data that we have, because we gather the data, but we have also to share it, and we have to verify it. Because spreading the right data is what will let us know the impact that we have, and then that would let us know how applicable or how suitable the environmental policies that we're applying are, what are the results that they are giving. And just to change also the mindset, because when many business cases are there where there are success stories of how a proper environmental policy can change everything within a company, because we have to go from wastewater treatment is just a cost to it is an investment. And there is opportunity to create, of course, job opportunities, to create value within the wastewater treatment and the wastewater chain, because we have to make it, to go back to from cradle to grave, from the input to the output. And this is where we go back to the human factor, to letting people know, to involving also the governments, to have the companies see that there can be a return of investment in wastewater treatment, because this can go this has to go hand by hand with the brands, with the consumers, with the general public, because we have to share the information, share the data. And this is why, the ZDHC Academy and the brands, they have this huge database, right? And at some point, when you share the information, from the human point of view, it's also very important, I think, right? Because it's you can touch the data, you can then translate the data, see what it's telling you, what those numbers are telling you, and how you can improve, and how you can change the current state of the art in order to improve the reality and the wastewater management world as a whole.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sharif, I guess you have a comment directly to this one.
Exactly, Klaus. Thank you. I just like to kind of make a point on the knowledge gap around all the players. We heard it's also a gap from the brands, how they do understand the common framework and the results and testings, and how the improvements has been perceived by the supply chain business partner or the manufacturing facilities. But what I see that to kind of in order to do the scaling or the scale up, there is a mass democratization of knowledge has been needed. And what does it mean is that we understand this knowledge has been very technical, but there has to be a general people versions of what does it mean? What does it the wastewater treatment technology mean? What is the difference between color in wastewater and something else? I mean, for examples, we do not react of the color for a Coke, and we do not think twice to kind of drink that Coke immediately. While as when color has been discharging to the wastewater, we perceive that that is a very bad water, while we know that a clean water can be a very toxic water as well. So there is a kind of a very much democratizing of knowledge has been needed, I would say that, and for the general people, and most importantly, the business case or the business investment decisions comes from the owner or the kind of the investors, who probably will not go very much into detail on those technicalities. So I think that that's one of the preconditions. And the second one is, of course, we do not outplay the need for technical knowledge and all those things. Third one, I see that as a gap, is that when I looked at all the questions that has been coming out in the chat and the questions, a lot of those questions are been about technicalities. I'm wondering why there is no such platform while the day-to-day level practitioners can come in and they ask the problems and they can get a kind of answer out of that. I'm having an issues in my clarifier of sludge bulking. How can I solve that? where is the solutions, where they can kind of go and seek solutions from the experts and all those things. And I think that is something we really need to look at, that how can we build that platform of knowledge sharing and the info sharing and probably the best practices as well. And I see that probably ZDHC can kind of play a clear role where it can address brand capacities, the technical service providers, their capacity, and also the kind of the supply chain partners as well.
Yeah, I think that's it's an extremely good point. I mean, you see those questions coming out a lot from out of suppliers as well doing training, and you see the questions coming back from training providers. People are actually looking for some kind of platform forum where they can address their issues directly, not only in the training itself, but also, outside of that. And the possibility to actually include more people in that framework of training is important, of course, very important, because they can then address those questions as well. But what I find, what for me, and I think we talked about it already a bit in the beginning, what is always a struggle in the end is, okay, but how do I scale? I mean, we have limited resources. So what can we do? And I'm not only talking in terms of people. I mean, with the training providers that we do our work with the organizations that we collaborate with, we can scale up to a certain amount, but we would also need funding. We would need resources in terms of funding as well. And thinking about that, and I know I talked about it with you as well prior in conversations as well, Gundolf. How does, for example, a GIZ tackle this problem of the funding, and how could we potentially maybe create something that would support these types of initiatives that we have to scale the training and the education, and create this platform for suppliers to be able to ask questions? How could we step up that funding model?
Yeah, thank you, Mariella. Well, yeah, you said it. Funding is a big issue, and that's what I said initially. We have also to look on the economical benefit for the producer, for all related stakeholders, and that. Of course, we have, compared overall, quite substantial development aid from the German government, focusing as well on private sector development as such, but at the end, it's peanuts compared what's the running. The money which is running the whole business. Nevertheless, I see here a very important role of us, as we see us somehow as kind of an initiator for change management. Now, it was also raised in some of the questions, we need a change of the mindset, we need a change of behavior, we need more education and knowledge, capacity building, what we were talking the whole day about. And of course, we also need somehow the local governments to bring into here. Yeah, it is not only just that we can leave it up to the private sector and to all of you, brands, suppliers, things like that, to solve the issue. We need also clear framework conditions to ensure fair competition between different countries. It doesn't make sense to have very strict environmental compliance in one country and in other countries nobody cares about. Of course, where the production is going to, if there's no compliance with international requirements from ZDHC, but we also know how to be compliant on the paper and how it looks on the reality. And I think here it's more like bringing the different bits and pieces together, initiate the change management on different ends. And what we do is, of course, we can pilot things on the test basis, and if it works, then involve multipliers to raise local capacity for the training capacities. Yeah, so that the knowledge is really available on the ground. What we see is, okay, we get a request from a company, for example, for a specific consultancy service, and there's no one in the country who can really answer the question. So, yeah, and that is a bit the point, and it was also raised earlier today. We need the knowledge available on the ground, which could be either in local language or by training multipliers in the country and also involving universities, the benefit, let's say the return of investment by training students, of course, it's a bit more in the middle long term. Nevertheless, it's are the future leaders, the innovators, and we have to consider them. And that is a bit a challenge, really bringing all the different ends from a micro level to the macro level together. And ZDHC here is playing a crucial role, as under the umbrella of ZDHC, we have created, or you have created, a very substantial level playing field, bringing the right stakeholders together. It doesn't make sense only having agreement with one brand, yeah, and they develop their own standard. Because at the end, we come to that the supplier says, okay, 1 week I'm producing for company A, they have stricter requirements, and the rest of the year I'm producing for other countries which absolutely don't care about any requirements. So that means we need a level playing field. We need also involve the governments to set clear frameworks, which also give guidance. Yeah, if everybody knows what are the rules they have to consider for the game, it's much easier. The cheating and things like that, yeah, maybe we leave it out at the moment, of course. That's the reality we are facing for, but we have to look forward and also somehow seeing the good things. And yeah, that is supporting the different ends, also analyzing the legal requirements and also bringing brands multiplier together, develop new solutions, and that is a good thing also with public funding somehow. We have, some ways more possibilities as the budget or the funding is available to do something new.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also collaboration within all these bigger, fundamental organizations that are able to support that implementation is extremely important. And that's, of course, why, the collaboration with the GIZ in terms of the Academy, but as well with WWF and with the WWF is so essential to support that scaling up and look at also funding together, look at the approaches of how we can do that as organizations, bringing us together here within this specific conference is extremely useful to do that. What I would like to check in on, because I know that Sohail, you also had some comments on that, on the scalability and the funding. So please, before I forget, and before we move to the next question, do still chip in on what Gundolf was saying.
Yeah, thanks, Mariella. I think Gundolf and Sharif raised very, very pertinent points about the scalability, because sometimes the technology is there, the resources are there, but the connectivity is quite important. And it's also relevant to the solutions and role of education, the slide which you are mentioning right now, how to scale up, because the enabling environment is quite important, like which was already discussed. Like if we provide the enabling environment and the collaboration, so this is the key for the expansion of the technology, for the scalability, because sometimes it has been observed very state-of-art researches have been done in the institutions and the universities, but then those became shelved or those are dormant. Why? Because there isn't any connectivity with the local industry, with the associations, with the government. Because if the connectivity is there, then those kinds of the state-of-art technologies can be multiplied at the larger scale and then could be replicated. And for sure, whenever there is that kinds of the mechanism, so the governments sometimes also they pay attention to pitch into that way, and then the funding restrictions are also catered partially. And for sure, the collaboration of the different institutions and the organization, just like the GIZ, WWF, ZDHC, and the brands, we can come together to resolve that issue with it as a joint venture in the future. Sure.
Thank you, Sohail. And I wanted to go back to one or two points before because time went really fast, and I know that we can keep on talking about this for a long, long time. But before we go back to the last part, I was and to look at the conclusion and the commitment that we have made actually as a ZDHC Academy for this Water Week, I did want to link to something that Gundolf was saying before as well about the fashion industry in itself. and how it actually currently functions. Because in the end, indeed, you know, the way currently we address, you know, production and we work together in relationships to suppliers, that is very different from, you know, brand to brand. The close relationships are there in a big group of brands, but we also know that there's a lot of fragmentation. So how are the brands, and I'm looking in the direction of the brands, and Elena or Sharif, I don't know who would like to answer that first, but how are the brands thinking of tackling that issue, the actual fragmentation that is currently still happening within the industry, because that relationship is so important with your supply chain, right? To have that connection to tackle these issues is very important.
Absolutely. Mariela, the challenges related to wastewater treatments or installing a ETP or revamping an ETP is not a matter of overnight. ETP is a complex process, and it's not of buying a machines and then just set up that machine and next day the problem is solved. It's a long, complex process, require involvement from many different functions within the facility, even utility, dyeing, washings, and the owners even, and the management, and the people who will run all those things. So what we have learned, Mariela, is that we need to have a pragmatic approach, and most importantly have passions to improve the industries to the desired level, because the ETP and what we have been also learned that the most of the ETP has been installed before the ZDHC standard has came into the effect. So which means that there is a certain gap in terms of designs when it comes to the earlier ETPs, and then we expect them to meet the standards of the ZDHC, which will require time. And then once we've been started to look at even improving the performance, which require more investment, revamping, and then probably the process change, it will take time. And then I think it's been kind of a precondition to say that the long-term partnership is absolutely be needed, and this is what we have been expected in our supply chain partners, and we can say that many of our partners have been invested into their ETPs, in the technology, and in doing so, we have been always kind of be with them and to understand that what are the kind of challenges that they have been facing and how can we support them in terms of improving those things. And then, of course, hopping or kind of changing the locations of the buying pattern will not solve that part, of course.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, Elena, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I mean, the fragmentation of the supply chain and changing and evolving supply chains can always be a challenge when we try to maintain a certain level of understanding amongst our partners. But I think I would focus probably on the first one and most obvious one. We really focus on building long-lasting relationships with our suppliers, because that helps us develop that trust and transparency and collaboration that creates that enabling environment that you were talking about before, a high-performing environment that cultivates innovation and progress. Another one that I would like to highlight is the importance of extending the reach of supply chain. I think the more brands are using supply chains, the more brands are using ZDHC, the more likelihood will be that when a new supplier, for example, joins a supply chain or a third party of a supplier, then they will be familiar with ZDHC framework. So that's, I think, a very area that is very important to focus on. And I think the last one, the last point would be that those two obviously are ideal scenarios, and we need to realize that, despite those efforts, there might be always the need for continual engagement with suppliers, and also offer various levels of engagement to ensure that we do not leave anyone behind, but we still maintain a constructive, challenging bar or top, like we said before, for those most advanced partners, always with the aim, obviously, of bringing everyone to the same standard.
Thank you. And I think that's actually a very nice way to Although I have like a whole list of questions that I still want to ask you all, it is something that I would like to end with, because I do agree that, you know, that different types of collaboration, and it's also one of the things that we wanted to highlight in the end during our in our commitment and in our position paper for this week, not only between associations, suppliers, brands, industry organizations, educational bodies. It all needs to go hand in hand to actually, in the end, make it possible to scale not only education, but as well implementation. And like everybody said, it's not something that will happen overnight, but by creating something that we did with the ZDHC, we are trying to pave a way that might be an inspiration as well for other industries, and see how we could actually bring that message across, that what we're doing together is actually working. So that's also an inspiration that I want to give to other industries that are actually on this call, that this is the key, that collaboration between all these different parties, and looking for solutions, and don't tackle them alone. And in that sense, unfortunately, though, I had some questions about all the new things that are happening in terms of education. We will keep them for another session, maybe on the via the ZDHC Academy later this year. I would like to ask Klaas to do a short wrap up of what we've been discussing. We might go a few minutes over time, but Klaas, the floor is yours.
I will make it really, really short. So I think we discussed a lot. We covered a lot of ground. It's unbelievable. We still have questions open, but there are some. So what we have talked about is actually that there's a lot of willingness for driving the change in the industry. There's a lot of willingness once there's awareness. So sometimes we really need to start at that point. Whereas for other stakeholders, other actors, we also have to start at a later point with more specific questions, more specific challenges, and more advanced challenges. What it needs is not only the people power behind it, it also needs a little bit of investment and commitment from business partners to each other to enable the change. And in that context, we also heard that governments, local governments, play a very important role to set the framework for expectations. Or as one of the panelists put it, needs will create also innovation, if I noted this correctly. So it's really all of this needs to come together, but there's a lot of willingness to change in the industry. And also technology is not the biggest challenge. It's such as same as willingness. It is there. Once there's the understanding things are needed, they can be actually applied, but the framework needs to be set for it. And a global approach, a unique or a central and unified voice is what makes it easier for everyone. And so I'm happy that this is exactly what we would like to do with ZDHC and the ZDHC Academy.
True. Yeah. So with that, I would like to share as well what we have set as our water action commitment for the conference this week, for the summit. If you would go to our water action commitment on the webpage, you will see that we put it in a bit longer and a bit more extensively than you find it here. But in the end, one of the key things that we as a ZDHC Academy would like to do is to make sure that there is that one global central capacity building place and platform available, what the industry is looking for in terms of chemical, wastewater, effluent treatment, water management. For now, only within our own industry, so within the textile industry, but for sure, the importance of having this one space overall for water and for the world to tap into in terms of knowledge is extremely possible, extremely possible, I would say, and extremely important. So we try to, with this commitment, try to connect to the goal that UNITAR has set as well, to create a water academy globally, there where we can feed into with all the knowledge that we have with all our organizations together. And for us, it's something that we will work on towards 2030 as one of the commitments that we want to make with our partner organizations and also with the organizations that we are working with on a daily basis. So with that, we would like to almost at, well, at the right time. We would like to close this session and thank you very, very much for attending the session during this summit. We would like to thank all the panelists that have joined us today and have given their valuable experience in the industry from all different angles. It was great having you here and hearing all your inputs. If you would like to learn more about the ZDHC Academy or partner with us at ZDHC, please have a look at our Water Action Agenda commitment that is placed online, and we will share this information as well with you after the actual session via email or at the ZDHC Academy platform or the ZDHC Foundation webpage. After the session, we will make sure to share the recording with you and send the detailed information on where you can find the commitment and the information about our organization and our collaboration that we are doing together. Thank you again for joining. We appreciate it very much. And we hope to see you again somewhere at the ZDHC Academy. And good day.